the old world is ending, and we have the opportunity to rethink everything. This is a show about the structural problems in our world and the real solutions that we have today to transition from an apocalyptic storm of war, scarcity, and ecological collapse into a collaborative and sustainable futuristic society that serves all life. You may think it's an impossible dream, but the alternative is an inevitable nightmare. We're your hosts, Zachary Marlowe, Matt Holton, and Amanda Smith. And together, when we can move past this economic absurdity to come together and actualize our collective potential to create something completely new, we are Moneyless Society. It takes great courage to not just accept things as they are and speak our truths about things that may be perceived as unconventional. However scary this prospect may seem, it can not only lead to our own individual liberation, but also to the liberation of humanity. In achieving our own individual freedom and liberation, by speaking our own authentic truths, and then by engaging in something greater than ourselves, we can and will bring about the liberation and the freedom of all humanity. For us to shift to a beautiful new paradigm that works for all of humanity, it's going to require each of us first to shift our own understandings of what's needed and what's possible. But then, we will also need to find our own individual courage and speak our truth in plain sight and earshot of the conventional voices that may label us as crazy. This is a passage from the New Copernican Revolution by one of today's guests, Troy Wiley. He's joining us with Robert Schram, his partner and co-host of the Future Now podcast, and too many other change-making ventures to really count. They're working like us to help us transition from this dark age of plagues and feudal corporate rule and the god of the market to a new renaissance, the great paradigm shift of bringing humanity from the false economic cosmology that places the dollar at the center of our meaningful universe. So Troy, what is the New Copernican Revolution?
If you read it, then maybe you're the one guy that bought a copy of it. But thank you. No, I've sold a few copies, but yeah, I wrote a book back in 2016 called The Next Copernican Revolution, and in a nutshell, it's about the paradigm shift that we've gone through historically, with when we realized that the Earth is not the center of the universe, that the sun is, and the impacts that's had in how we see the world and how we had to evolve with that new worldview. And so it basically talks about this new paradigm shift that we're embarking on now, which is what I put forth there is that the whole infinite growth paradigm that is completely unsustainable. Then once again, we're being forced to reconsider our entire human operating system and evolve to a post-capitalist, post-monetary world. So, and I, going back as far as probably 2009 is when I first came upon the Venus Project and like the Zeitgeist movement with some of Peter Joseph's movies. And yeah, so I've struggled for years to wrap my head around that. And then once I did, it changed everything about how I see the world and how unsustainable it is. Yet on the other side, we could literally create a paradise on Earth. That's that. We also, Robert and I were co-founders of this group called the World Summit. And basically it was about unifying all the different change organizations and movements and new paradigm groups to basically come together and unify around enacting these changes and go beyond our failed institutions, our political systems, and our outdated economic system to help bring about this new paradigm. And so we had different people from these different RBE post-monetary groups, and that went pretty well. And we learned a lot of things from that, and ultimately that sort of fizzled out. You could say we were ahead of our time, or we just, we couldn't command the resources or get the followers. We had a couple of really good solid years where some really productive work was done. And then it just sort of fizzled out as groups do. But we learned some things about that maybe we can talk about in this call today that is sort of kind of front and center in my mind, is that, all these well-meaning groups uh, anybody, all these world-changing groups, we end up competing against each other for attention, for fundraising. We end up recreating the wheel again and again and again. And all of these different groups, we learned, work in silos. They're sort of attached to their own projects, and that's great. And everybody's doing great work. But if we're really going to achieve this critical mass that Robert can talk about a little later, then we need to start unifying and coming together and figuring out a way to really catalyze this cultural renaissance that we need. And so anyway, after that, then we created our most recent program or group we were involved with some guys out of Budapest called Envienta, and we teamed up to create a website called Hack Humanity that's based on creating hackathons, and sort of same deal with that. We're struggling there to keep things going. And most recently, due to COVID, Robert and I and Hack Humanity group, and then even my son, who is a filmmaker in Denver, partnered briefly to make a series of short videos called The Great Pause that focuses on COVID and the new paradigm that we are this close to creating if we choose to go that way, versus going back to the old normal, which was totally abnormal. And so that's just a little overview of some of the different groups that Robert and I have been working in. He and I kind of tag team on a lot of things because we just really get some good synergy going by working together and speaking the same language. And so if it's okay, I'll turn it over to Robert.
Thanks, Troy. Yeah, I think we met at the mini summit in 2018. And if you want to label me as an activist, for instance, I think I started with that kind of activities in 2011. And I started doing that because I was wondering, I'm mainly an observer, and I was wondering what we are doing here together with the current systems, that this really cannot be sustainable for the long run. And I was asking myself, okay, if you want to do something different, how would you do it? I started studying alternative economic and social and governance models. And after 2 years, I thought, well, let's see what we can do together. And I founded the group United Earth and started being an activist at the Zeitgeist movement. And then later on in 2018, it evolved through Synergy Hub Network and the World Summit. And I think what really, for me, the most interesting is the fact that we can lower the illusionary barriers in our minds is already a big step if we sort of take a look at the solutions we have and not focus on the root causes or the problems too much. But they are very important, and we can talk about that probably later. So I've had a career as a project coordinator in utility, very dry stuff, coordinating technical installations. When I met Troy, I think he was one of the first dreamers that are very grounded and really make it possible for people to not only come together, but also create the synergy, flow into this ever-evolving process. And that makes it so interesting, and that's what I love to do as a change maker or a transition engineer, whatever you want to call it.
Well, it's like the Copernican Revolution. It's moving away from seeing the sun as the center of the universe, and we need to move away from seeing the individual as the center of the universe, and to extrapolate further on that, to see isolated problems instead of being able to see them as a full cosmology. All of these activist groups are fighting for their aim, or progressive movements are fighting for one tangible thing. They say, we'll get this, and then we'll get this, and then we'll get this, which all of these attitudes just totally forego and misunderstand the core principle of reality, that it's all connected, that it's all works together. And that's the only way that we can really move forward, is if we move out, we completely change not just one aspect of this, or our energy system, or our health system, or even our economic system. I mean, that is really just kind of the materialization of our worldview, of our values, that really more than anything, we need to change our entire way of seeing the world and the reality, away from isolation, atomization, being cut off, being isolated, and more into a more holistic connected togetherness.
Just some random thoughts I thought I would try to combine into one big picture. I wanted to latch on to what Robert said about being a transition engineer. That's the first time I've heard that term. I love it, and I hope you don't mind if I steal it and use it over and over. I think that's what we should all be viewing ourselves as. Thank you. Anyone who's dove into this deep end with the way the world is today post-pandemic and is striving to make change, we are transition engineers on some level. And then Troy mentioning how we tend to keep regenerating the same animal, the same machine, how we're all striving for the same goal. I remember bringing that up myself in our RJing episode. I believe it's called Structure of Destruction, right, Zach? And how we discussed there about how there are so many different factions and groups striving for systems change, but it's kind of like the denominations of the Christian religion. Everybody wants to get to heaven, but they all have their own way, and that's the only way they think it can be achieved. So it's more important than ever, I think, to focus on solidarity. But having said all of that, something else you said, Robert, you said that Troy is a grounded dreamer, something else I've never heard. That's just definitely a contradiction in terms. And it reminds me of a brief conversation Troy and I had before the show where he commented on how professional we handle things on the back end. And it sparked, basically I realized, and I don't know why it wasn't more obvious before then, but it's so hard to achieve these goals, obviously, because we're working within the monetary system, and it's because we have to uphold industry standards. And at the same time, we want to be empathetic, tolerant, patient, understanding. This isn't just a Hollywood production. This is a space for people to come together and talk about their projects, offer ideas, let us offer up theirs, and truly collaborate and move forward together. That's the key, is moving forward together. But it's really hard to put all those pieces together and make them fit together when you're trying to do things the way the monetary system demands they be done.
Something I find interesting too, and one of the things I really liked about your book, Troy, the Copernican Revolution, was that you go into spiral dynamics. And I kind of wanted to touch on that a little bit in the show too, because I'm sure a lot of our readers, listeners, some of them might be familiar with it, but I'm sure there's a lot of them that aren't too. And it's a really interesting concept to me. I know a little bit about it, but it also kind of speaks to unification, right? And also like a progressive, I don't even know exactly what to call it because the terms are escaping me at the moment. But can you elaborate a little bit on spiral dynamics and how it kind of applies to our work?
And it sort of comes back to what Zach was talking about. That we need to start taking a whole systems view, and which you might call a holistic or integral or integrated framework or perspective on things. So there's what's called spiral dynamics that sort of that's a model developed by a guy called Claire Graves back in the 50s or so. And that's a developmental model that basically describes how both individuals as well as whole cultures and societies develop through different levels of consciousness, or you can call them value perspectives, what they value. And so, in a nutshell, we've evolved from an archaic worldview to a warrior worldview, then to a traditional worldview, then a modernistic worldview, then a postmodern worldview, and then now an integral or integrated worldview. And then even potentially beyond that, which I call in my book a neo-tribal worldview that harkens back to some of the tribal ways. And now we can bring forth that some of the values of that worldview, but do so in alignment with our high technology, et cetera. And then, so I also talk about integral philosophy in there, which is just a holistic way of looking at all of the, everything, all of our world's problems, or, and, seeing that there's both an individual and collective perspective. There's also both an internal and an external perspective. And so it's a 4-quadrant model, and we're being incomplete if we don't sort of look at all of the world's issues through all 4 of those different lenses. And there's more on that if you look into some of the luminaries like Ken Wilber Don Beck, et cetera.
I like that term, a tribalization. It harkens to Terence McKenna's term, which is archaic revival, which is the way that I'm thinking about it in this moment is we actually have the technology and the power and the social ability and the insight and the true scientific sociological understanding of human nature, basically to realize what is intuitive, what is not intuitive, and use all of our powers today to basically make being human easier, to allow us to truly be ourselves, not to branch off from our humanness altogether in this kind of weird transhuman, although I'm not totally against, continual adaptation and evolving in that way, but to become not human. I mean, that's what our technology and our worlds and our environments are basically doing to us. They're even the way we live, the way we sit, the way we stand. I mean, we there's so much we don't understand about ourselves, our bodies, our biological nature. I actually just the other day, I kind of had this epiphany that, that people in the attempt to find the perfect term for what is our way of thinking, is it structural, is it integrated, is it systems thinking? And I think really the best term, the most irreducible motif is environmental, that we need to think environmentally. And I think because it encompasses everything. It encompasses the fact that we are products of our environment, that we are conditioned, totally social beings that are interdependent on everything else around us, that we are not isolated, individualistic people. We are products of our environment. We are our environment. And I think the archaic revival, tribalization, which I think a lot of people might be afraid of that. They're like, oh, we don't want to go backwards. We don't want to go back. But it's like the fundamental reality of being human back in, egalitarian societies, hunter-gatherer societies, in many ways. I mean, even you go back to the Middle Ages, the medieval peasant worked less than we do. They worked about, 20, 30 hours a week. The constraints of modern life are not good for us. And we can really, truly use our technology and all of our means and science and understanding. And if we come together, that's the caveat to all of it, to really bring us back to that place of just being human. Yeah,
that's great. And my book also, in Spiral Dynamics, talks also to what you were mentioning, Zach, about this focus on the individualism now. And in the book, I talk about, and I reference a lot of over 100 citations from different anthropologists, et cetera. And, and even Howard Zinn talks about how our understanding of Native Americans in particular, but indigenous cultures in general, is just very flawed. And, there's people going to the extreme on the other dimension. They call it, they're idolizing ancient cultures and call it the noble savage. And that's not exactly accurate either. But we know through a lot of anthropological studies that, like you said, the indigenous tribal societies were very egalitarian. They were very healthy. They did not work. They were not, living short, brutish lives and dying at a young age. That's all sort of mythical and not. But the other aspect, the healthy tribal cultures exhibited, which is what I call collective individualism or community individualism, whatever. So it's a balance. And in many of these, particularly the Adirondack Indians, or I forget, one of the Native American Indian tribes, they had a very healthy collective individual. So it wasn't this oppressive group control structure. They actually respected and encouraged individuality within that. So this whole geo or neo-tribal thing that I point to actually respects that and allows for that. It respects and allows for diversity. We want diversity. Mother Nature and evolution favors diversity, but let's also have a collective cohesiveness, as Matt talked about, that's sort of an overriding, we take care of the tribe, and now the tribe is all of humanity, right? But so Spiral Dynamics talks about going, as we've evolved through these different levels, from archaic to tribal to warrior, then to traditional, then to modern, postmodern, and integral. It's actually they're oscillating back and forth between a community orientation or collective orientation and an individualistic orientation. And we know where we are now, at least in the United States, we're hyper individualistic, and so we need to come into a more of a community individualism.
Right, that makes sense too, and you can kind of see that dynamic right now with all the kind of conflict that's going between essentially the left, who are trying to go more of the community aspect with government and whatnot, I believe, and the right, who are kind of promoting more of the individualistic, in a sense, capitalistic mindset as well. So it's interesting to watch those dynamics play out, and also have a path, like according to spiral dynamics, to see where it might go, and kind of is expected to go in the future. And one of the things I kind of like about it too is it's not essentially like the United States as a whole. It's essentially, like Zach was saying, our environment. We can create an environment that's conducive to those, more, I don't want to say more evolved states essentially, but as time goes on and we become, aware of different circumstances and situations, and the need for those actions, that's kind of what pushes the situation along, I think, a lot of the time. So it's just kind of I find it really interesting and really helpful, to look at spiral dynamics in the long term of things, and just to kind of use it almost as a map, essentially, as a kind of a guide to where a lot of us can begin to take action.
Back to the 4-quadrant model of integral philosophy, the lower right quadrant is the external and the collective. So that's pointing to our systems, right? The systems that we've created, that we've actually created a monster. And now our unhealthy systems, both governmental and economic, bring out the worst qualities of humanity, right? So people are always talking, human nature, we're inherently violent and greedy and all that bullshit. It's our systems that are, and all the perverse incentives that bring out the worst of our qualities. So that's where you guys come in, and where we come in, where we start really addressing the root cause issues.
I actually want to read a little text thread I had with my dad the other day that was about that exactly. I was just talking about just some horrible things that were going on in the world, and just trying to help him understand things on a deeper level. And he said, I wish that God had made better humans. And I said, the humans aren't the problem. It's the social system that makes even good humans bad. It's the design of society, not the design of us. It's not about replicating bad people or replacing bad people with good ones. We're all good and we're all bad. We're environmental. So we must change the environment to make good people its intended natural outcome. Whereas today we incentivize and reward all the most antisocial, ecocidal behavior. To that he said, humans created the system. And I said, reactions to scarcity and external environmental changes created the feedback loop of reactions that led to the system. But basically today we don't live in scarcity. We don't live under the conditions that we did thousands of years ago. That pushed us to create these systems and walled cities and all this stuff. We have the technology and the knowledge to break that cycle forever and to leave all of this behind and really truly create something new.
I just wanted to reflect a little bit, because you guys are talking about great stuff, and Zach mentioned, I think he said, we hardly understand ourselves. And coming back, also Matthew and Amanda, to this spiral dynamics, that's one layout, right? It's one way of visualizing things. I think that's one of the main interests from my part, and also World Summit, to make these processes visible, because that will help us, support us in lowering these illusionary barriers. And after getting to know spiral dynamics, that's the first time in my life I understood why so many people can think so differently, because everybody is at another level, and they can also, during their lifetime, we switch constantly. And this is also where it becomes so fuzzy and unclear for us. And things that we don't understand, we tend to shut down for them subconsciously. So I think that's really one of the beautiful things, and that also goes for a lot of them. But even though it's true, we've been struggling with this for thousands of years, right? All the dogmas that we experience, the religions. Matthew, you just mentioned the polarization. There's always two parties that are against each other, right? Whether it's now the vaccine people against the non-vaccine people. and I'm not really taking a stand on it, but I do believe that the root causes are very much overlooked, and we are doing a lot of fighting symptoms. We're fighting symptoms, and we rarely question the current systems that brings it back to the root causes.
Even if everybody gets vaccinated, right, then that's just going to allow us to go back to the old normal, business as usual, without really addressing the deeper thing, which is our whole socioeconomic paradigm, right? If right now governments could give everybody a universal basic income tomorrow, everybody could stay home. It wouldn't be considered a lockdown. It would be considered a smart and logical thing to do to stop the spread of COVID, right? Nobody's even thinking about that.
Consider it a break, a timeout. I mean, I think it's crazy that so many people, are so hung up on the vaccine things like that. And the reason that the vaccine was pushed so hard, as like the only solution, that like it shouldn't have gotten to this point where people think that that's the only solution, and it's still not working. I mean, I looked at a map of today of COVID spreading in America, and it's like, it's all red, it's like it's all high concentrations of this virus spreading still, because even with the vaccine, new variants are forming. We can't just sit down and shut up, which was nature basically saying, okay, I'm going to give you a reason that you all need to stop and think about what you're doing. Humanity, you're in timeout. you have been very naughty, and you are in timeout, and you need to sit down and think about what you've done. And we didn't do that. We're just like, no, we're going to get the vaccine. We're going to vaccinate people. We're going to keep going. And it's just an insane thing that like there were multiple countries all over the world that they didn't need, like New Zealand was back to school a few months in. They were, in Taiwan, they had baseball games. I mean, it was like there are solutions to this problem, but not if capital expansion, consumption, endless growth for no reason at the direct expense of human life. I just don't understand how anybody at this point cannot look at the world around us and see that COVID has obviated every single problem in our system, that this system is anti-life. This system is against human life, and it thrives on the destruction of life. That the corporations have made more money off this crisis that has killed more people in America alone than both world wars than ever in history. They're doing great, and they still have this narrative like, oh, we need to buckle down, we need more. It's just, right. They just can't stop. It's an addiction. So
the challenge that humanity has gone through now is that we are not learning our lessons. And a year ago, or when in March of when
over a year,
we created this video series called The Great Pause, which is about that very thing. Hey, let's take this as an opportunity. This great pause. We see wildlife coming back on the Golden Gate Bridge. We see coyotes there. You can actually hear the birds chirp in downtown New York City, and the skies were clear and no jet plane exhaust. And it was an amazing time for us to reflect. And we missed that opportunity. So now we're being faced with this opportunity once again with the Delta variation of COVID. Robert, that's what comes back to what you were saying. We are not learning, and things have to get worse before they get better, before the alcoholic hits bottom and then is forced to change.
Yeah, as an observer, I can see that the longer we will wait, getting to these root causes, solving these problems, and there's systemic also, but there's more. The longer we wait, the deeper the impact will be. And apparently we need these shocks. So it seems, that's what I'm observing. We need this shock therapy. We had these floodings in Europe very recently, like a few weeks ago. And basically when literally the water pours down into your basement or to your first floor ceiling, then people start waking up and they start asking questions. How is this possible? What's happening? I can see a positive note, because the longer, of course, we want to solve our problems, but the longer we stall them or wait with really coming to the right solutions, whatever you feel is right, the impact will be deeper and more profound. So who's to say what is the best way, right?
there's an aspect of that I address in my book as well about the acceleration of change. And it may seem like, God, it's taken us decades and we're not doing, we haven't even talked about climate change yet, right? That's a whole other thing, right? And nobody's talking about, addressing the economic system as a driver of climate change. And no one's questioning the infinite growth paradigm on a planet of finite resources. So we're not even there yet. But the point that I'm making is if it may seem like it's taken us decades to even start addressing climate change or switch our systems to deal with COVID, it's actually happening very, very rapidly. In my book, I document how these major shifts in consciousness and our worldviews based on spiral dynamics happened at a faster and faster pace. So, it would take us 50,000 years to change from, maybe warrior, tribal to warrior, then another, 1,000 years, 5,000 years to change from the warrior to traditional worldview, and then 1,000 years to go from traditional to modern, 500 years to go from modern to postmodern, and et cetera, et cetera. So that's an exponential curve in terms of accelerating timeline, right? So potentially, as things get worse and worse, things will ultimately, we're going to get to the singular timeline where things have to change rapidly because you can't keep going on in that pace without something. So potentially a major paradigm shift could happen very soon.
It's hard to imagine that it could get much worse before we take action and heed the things that are right in front of our faces. At the pandemic and post-pandemic, mid-pandemic, whatever we are at this point, the dogmas and the mechanisms of the monetary system, particularly the capitalist system, have never been as exposed as they are now. The curtains have been drawn. The puppet masters are in plain sight. So yeah, it's hard for me to wrap my head around how much worse it could possibly get. Knock on wood, I'm not trying to manifest anything, but before we all just go, hey, maybe we should not do these things that we can clearly see are causing the problem. I think something that's worth noting, and maybe it's obvious to some, but I feel like it's not for most, is that not only is systems change vital at this point, but so is the knowledge of systems design. Whether or not the capitalist system was all that intentional, some people argue that it wasn't intentional. If it was, then obviously we would all be better off today, or if it was intentionally insidious. But systems design is also where we should be putting a lot of our focus right now, because obviously, as Zach was saying, as I often say, we are a product of our environment. Jacques Fresco, Venus Project, everybody look into it if you haven't already. And we produce the feedback loops that reinforce the environment. As Matthew was trying to say earlier, the closer we get to climate disaster, or the closer we get to, drawing back from the edge and starting to heal and redesign society, whatever we approach, we're going to cascade whatever we're approaching, if that makes any sense. We're just going to basically self-propel ourselves. The trajectory is going to continue the way it's going unless we, divert. And how do we do it as collectively as possible is the question, really.
I mean, it's a wheel going down a hill. I mean, and I think it's crazy to me, so many people just don't see that they're still surprised when things get worse. They're still surprised by things getting out of control. I mean, it's a predictable response to a set of circumstances that has been hollowing out, reality and life as we know it, our planet, our stability, all of our social systems, every single aspect of, I'm sorry, there's like so much construction outside my window. It's killing me. It's fucking killing me.
Sorry.
Can y'all hear that?
Sorry, yeah, we hear. It's okay, Zach. No big deal. Keep going, man.
This is like the drill I hear in my head, like when I read through the news, or like when I see people not be able to make these connections, these broader connections to understand why things are the way they are. I think people are so disconnected or they're so reactive, and I think that is the design of capitalism. It's like the English language. It's like a kind of a mishmash of words from all over that was created to facilitate business and trade between all kinds of different cultures. Oh, a word there, a word there, a word there. It's like capitalism itself, even though the fundamental mechanics of trade and, self-interest and, a ruler and a worker has existed for thousands of years. I mean, it's kind of the foundational sort of civilizational principle. Capitalism itself is only a few hundred years old. And really what it is, when I read about Adam Smith and all this stuff, it's really a justification, a rationalization for what people were already doing anyway, which is basically the whole thing is based on, if we act in self-interest, this magical hand of the market is going to regulate that. So it's not like, we have this utopian visionary design. It's like, if we keep doing what we're doing, eventually it will lead to a utopia. So it's totally not, it's not intentional. And it's sad that so many people are locked into that paradigm of seeing, the conspiracy and everything. COVID is clearly a conspiracy because, look, they're profiting off of this so much, but it's an automatic reaction. It's an automatic reaction of this system, which is fundamentally reactive. It comes from the scarcity mentality of, I got to take more. I need this. I got to compete. Because it's like a rat in a cage. That's the ethos of capitalism, is a rat in a cage who, even if the belly is full, they're going to hoard more. So yeah, things are going to get a lot worse. Sadly, they're going to get a lot worse, and they're going to have to until we literally have no other option but to change.
Well, I think what a lot of people don't really understand, too, are the feedback loops that are at play, essentially, with a lot of the dynamics that are going on in our environment and in our economy and society and whatnot, especially in our environment, though, because what happens in our environment and the world affects our economy and our society and whatnot. I mean, look at the situation with Syria and all the people that were displaced from the drought in the Middle East. Climate change is essentially already starting to disrupt our way of life and bring climate refugees, people that can't subsist on land in places anymore because of droughts or fires or floods and whatnot. And this is going to become a more and more frequent thing as years go on. There's going to be more and more people that are displaced by these things, and they'll the results will probably be not what we're expecting sometimes too. Like look at this town. I've talked about it several times now that just was literally burnt off the map in Canada, not too long ago. I think it was Lytton, British Columbia. Who expected there to be 120-degree temperatures in Canada, and then there's like an entire town practically go up like a tinderbox, and now we've got these things that are going up with methane being released, in the Siberian Arctic, and they're looking into rock. Granite rock actually releases a lot more methane too, and it thaws, and that's happening with miles and miles of these rock formations. I guess they're up there. I read that in an article the other day. It's a different type of methane, like it's released from cracks and fissures when the rocks start to thaw. It's methane that's essentially below, in pockets and natural gas that's just below rock formations deep within the earth. And there's no telling how much is down there, but when ground and rock and mountains and things like that start to thaw, all of a sudden you have these cracks and fissures opening, and methane, which is far more powerful greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide, is getting released in massive amounts. And this is causing more things to melt. This is causing more sea ice to melt, which in turn, reflects less sun back into the atmosphere, back into outer space. And these feedback loops keep going, right? And so, if we think this year was hot in 2021, relatively speaking, compared to the rest of the 21st century, this year will be relatively cool. Right? 50 years from now, this is going to be a cool year. We'll be wishing that we had these temperatures again, especially if we keep going, at the breakneck speed we are with all the, emissions that we're releasing and whatnot, if we don't really do something to curtail it. So I fear that we've gone too far already. I am almost afraid, like we're starting to see scientific reports of people coming out and saying, well, they're giving, scientists are seriously considering what parts of the world will be best to inhabit if society is to collapse. Right? That was a report that just came out the other day. People are saying, well, I think New Zealand would probably be pretty safe. Right?
Yeah, that was a Business Insider article,
Yeah.
and I think it was published just 2 days ago. And I mean, of course, I wasn't surprised to not see America anywhere on the list of where you should be. In fact, in the actual analysis that was published in the Sustainability Journal, America is one of the least safest, most secure, sustainable places that one should end up at if societal collapse should happen. But I'm so glad that you spoke about the ecological feedback loops and how they are initiated by our economical feedback loops and just our inherent activities of our economic system, especially in the capitalist system. That's something also that needs equal attention.
They play on each other too. Our economic feedback loops have released ecological feedback loops that will further exasperate our economic woes and other feedback loops that we're experiencing in other parts of the economy. And this whole thing is just a giant mess.
And it just speaks volumes more to the fact that systems design is really the starting point of systems change, obviously, because if we don't move away from the for-profit system design, then we're just going to perpetuate the problem. We're just going to, as Troy said earlier, recreate the animal, just reproduce the same machine. So yeah, great points. I'm so glad you went into that.
What we're all talking about here is systems theory, an understanding of whole systems design, feedback loops, all that stuff. And I just want to point out that that's a relatively new capacity for humanity. We are not accustomed, generally speaking, to really fully understand and talk about systems in a holistic way. And so the society breaking down all around us is actually what's going to, accelerate our understanding of and adoption of systems thinking. And you see it happening now. I mean, we can talk about climate change reports till the sun comes home, but until people actually experience it, they're not going to get it. And so that's what we're seeing now with climate change, with COVID. All of a sudden, right, in these southern states, everybody's anti-vax and conspiracy theories about the vaccines, but when people start dying all around them, like Louisiana is out of control right now, and it's the worst vaccinated state as a percentage. All of a sudden now in these southern states, they're lining up and spending hours in line to get vaccinated now. So that's sort of the evolutionary impetus, right? Sometimes it has to come down to our own survival before we start taking action. And that's when, it's the alcoholic hitting bottom before he changes, and sometimes it's unfortunate that we have to go through pain and suffering. I'm a fan of Barbara Marx Hubbard, who always used to talk about conscious evolution, that we can start affecting our own evolution and avoiding some of this pain and suffering. But I don't know, we have a hard time with that. And
I don't know, personally, when I witnessed the videos that have went viral recently of the people dying in flooded subways, like that was all the consciousness I needed about it, so to speak. And how many more times are we going to witness something like that before saying, hey, like we need to go in a different direction. We need to go far left. Instead of adapting, we're stagnant.
It's the definition of insanity. You guys know Einstein's quote.
Indeed, it is.
Yeah.
Stagnant is maybe, I want to take a look at it if you guys are okay with it, because there's a lot of positivity here also, right? I mean, a lot of undercurrents are already moving, but they're not really visible. And since COVID began, thousands of groups have been clustering and coming together because we all feel the momentum, right? You see different momentums, they are sinking, getting in sync. And I think, and we talked about it in the beginning, we only need a critical mass of 5 to 10% that starts shifting, and the rest will automatically follow. So I do see a huge potential there. If this energy, if we reach this energy being freed up, we talked about feedback loops, right? The negative ones, but we also have positive feedback loops. The current systems we have, they are outdated, right? The governance system and the economic systems, they don't have feedback loops. They're static. But we have new systems already, a lot of new models that give these positive feedback loops, so we can monitor when something is happening in this sector, it has an effect on another sector. And then we can sort of adapt to the situation. And that's where a lot of groups, millions of these organizations, like you guys also, they're already working on it for years now.
And I'd like to add to that, we're talking a lot about the systems here, and indeed our systems need to change. But to go back to the 4 quadrants and to not be incomplete, we need to also look at the interiors, our consciousness, our worldviews. A good model that we found very useful in explaining all this was developed by Joanna Macy, who is a Buddhist scholar, and she came up with something called the 3 pillars of activism. And we've done some videos and slide decks about that. You can go to hackhumanity.net, and we have slide decks on there that you can check out. But her 3 pillars brilliantly sum up, and briefly, I'll give you those. You basically have the shift in consciousness pillar, you have holding actions pillar, and then you have the new systems pillar. And so the point she's making is that we need to be active in all 3 of these pillars to bring about revolutionary change. And what happens too often is activists get stuck focusing on just one pillar. Like there's a lot of activists in various communities, maybe New Age communities, maybe consciousness communities that put consciousness as primary, and everything is about, we've got to change our consciousness first, otherwise none of this other stuff will come about, none of the systems change. Then there's other advocates and activists who focus strictly on the systems and leave out the consciousness. And then there's the holding actions pillar, which is about, the people, putting their bodies in front of old growth forest and stopping the bulldozers from tearing down the trees, or maybe Black Lives Matter activists or whatever. They're about saying a holy hell no to stop the destruction, to hold off the destruction that's happening. And so the point is, we need activists in all 3 of these pillars, but we can't just work in silos. We can't just work in one pillar and not the others. And that's why the 3 pillars of activism is so great. And so we kind of put some ideas out there and transition tactics that shows how we can be active and effective in all 3 of those pillars, but working under a cohesive whole to bring about transformative change.
So I spent a lot of time working with Extinction Rebellion, and I was actually reading about this and, talking to some people about it before this show. And I went through a very difficult falling out with that group, because right around the time of the fires in California, and the skies were turning red, and everything was so apocalyptic and insane, and, Trump, COVID, election, Black Lives Matter was going on. And I was really fighting in this organization, this group, to change our tactics, because they were spending all this energy and effort to organize this protest about, oil wells at Los Angeles, which is a good thing to raise awareness about. But I just kept saying again and again, this is a powerful moment where so many people are coming out, and you are making no attempt to, one, align with this other issue, or gain kind of tap this critical mass that's going on around us and help divert it to that, and help show people, look, climate is a race issue. Climate is a labor issue. Climate it's going to affect all marginalized people more than anything. It's the issue, and it's the issue we should all collect our efforts into, because the only way to change climate change, the only way to tackle climate change, nobody can really, there's flimsy arguments that you can make, energy shifts and blah, blah, blah. No, we just need $300 billion to blah, blah, make these changes to infrastructure or electric cars, all this, that's all horseshit. really, if you are a serious scientist and you look at this issue, or even if you're just a serious human being asking the right questions, the only way to tackle climate change is a full systems change, a complete inversion of everything that we're doing, the exploitation, the extraction, the wasteful consumerism, globalization, all of these things. The entire matrix of our economic system that guides and dictates every single aspect of life. The only thing we can do is to change our system. And I couldn't get that through to these people in this group, to these activists, to these people who cared very much, who were very educated, who were very aware, but they were very unserious in their ability to change their tactics and understand that this is an intersectional issue, that the best way for us to organize is an intersectional way, and is to hit all of these points, not just our one point. So I totally agree with what you're saying there. But I also want to kind of use that as a segue, because what we were doing, our intentions were like artful protest, creating these images and scenes and artistic visuals that arrest people, that pull people out of their sort of dream. And you mentioned earlier that you are focused on an artistic revolution, and I am more than anything an artist. And every act that I do, every way that I think about the world is through the lens of art. That we are all of us artists, creators. We are creating life together. That's the other aspect of evolution, that species work together to create this beautiful tapestry of an ecosystem, that we are all creating our own reality. And revolutionary change, I think, I was trying to explain this to a friend the other day who's an artist and who is not involved and who is just neutral. And I was basically saying, this is the greatest opportunity for you as an artist, as a creative person, as an imaginative person, to actually create the world around you, to build the new world, all of us, like a work of art, trying to rally the radical movement of revolutionary artists. Because I just want to know, where do I join?
I want to add something on that too. It's a really great point, because the other day somebody asked me, like, don't you just get tired of all this bad news with climate change? Don't you get tired of trying? Don't you get tired of doing this work that you're doing? And my answer was, no, never, absolutely not. And because it's a passion of mine, and I view it as an opportunity to create, right? And to create a new, beautiful world. And it's what keeps me going on a daily basis. And as an artist myself, too, as a musician, I kind of shifted a lot of that passion from that into this as well. I've almost put music kind of on hold, to a large extent in my life, to kind of create, I don't want to say content, but get the message out there about what we can do as far as this system and structural change, and connecting with people and creating new relationships and new systems and new organizations and collaborating and everything else. And that to me is a beautiful art form as well. Just kind of waiting to be done. And I don't even know where to go from there.
I just got one more little point there, that we're not just creating content, we're creating the future. We're redesigning the whole world. I mean, and how exciting is that? I totally relate to that. I have so much passion for this, that even like engaging with the bad news on a daily basis, it's like, it's not bad news, it's catalyst, forcing change. Like all of these bad things that happen, so many people just shake their heads, or they tune it out, or they distract themselves. But really, it's fuel. It's fuel for change, and we are changing. We have to wake up and change. But that's not just a daunting thing. That's like, if you can truly step into your creative potential as a human being and look at this as, wow, the system sucks, okay, but things are bad, things are bleak, but we really have the opportunity, all of us, to just completely change it, to have our mark, to take our brush and paint the world whatever we want it to be.
Everything that you and Matthew have just summed up could be dialed down to the motto of my extremely modest little art gallery online, which is, the world is your canvas, paint it with your vision. Indeed, it is beyond exciting to know that, to realize that you do have the power, so to speak, at least the creative agency, to make the world the way it should be, and the way you want it to be, if only we dial into what is rational and what will sustain us, versus just cramming ourselves into the box that we're forced to be crammed into.
Sorry for going on for such a long time to finally get back to you guys there.
No, that's great.
Go ahead, give me your thoughts. Give us your thoughts as well on that subject.
Do you guys remember, I'm sure I'm looking for it here, I can't remember the full quote, at the beginning of Zeitgeist Moving Forward from Ernst Fischer. So in a decaying society, art, if it is truthful, must also reflect decay. And unless it wants to break faith with its social function, art must also show the world is changeable and help to change it. So that's what we're all talking about here. I mean, art has revolutionary potential. I've always believed that. And, you know, artists have always been at the forefront or the vanguard of revolutionary movements. And because it affects, that's the shift in consciousness pillar. Art has such a transformative power to help shift our consciousness about what's possible. And so I have a company, it's not a plug, but I have a company called Artovida, and I partner with artists around the world, and we put their designs on different sustainable products. And a few years back, my company was actually the sole sponsor of the World Summit group. And I tried to create some kind of an artist collective back then to bring about some more transformative change. And, you know, that, as I said, that whole World Summit project went by the wayside and then evolved into some other things. And my company now is actually evolving into something new called the Renaissance Engine.co. And Matt and Amanda and I, when we talked a few weeks back, we're talking about, you know, how might we do something with artists to really help the movement, the Moneyless Society or the RBE movement. And there's some interesting ideas and thoughts, but with the Renaissance Engine, I'm actually getting into more of a coaching and consulting role with artists and help them, you know, bring out their full potential, create some, what I call a muse type of business that provides an autopilot cash flow type of situation, almost like a basic income for artists, so to speak. So it frees them up to do what they're really passionate about and not have and not worry about their basic needs, right? And I personally, I'll share, my business took a major hit with COVID, and I've gotten, you know, the bailouts, the different EIDL loans or the PPP loans here in America. And I've also gotten unemployment insurance that my own company has paid for, so I don't feel guilty about it at all. And so I got firsthand taste of what a universal basic income can do to people and what it's done for me, not to have to worry about my business going under or going back and getting a job at Home Depot or some shit. You know, it's freed me up to actually evolve into an entirely new model with my business and this new Renaissance Engine. And so now I'm able to partner with artists in the real sense of the word partnership. And so we're creating an artist collective. And we had talked with Amanda and Matt about perhaps we can do something like create an artist collective within the RBE, post-monetary, open access, moneyless society movements. And I mean, I have a term that I use in my websites called impact artists. I only want to work with artists that want to change the world. But what if we had, you know, something that's more about revolutionary artists that Amanda, I've seen her amazing artwork, and, you know, she's infusing paradigm shifting themes into her artwork. And, you know, Matt's built, what's the New World Clothing, New World Apparel website that Matt's built.
Yeah, we're still working on it. It's kind of a work in progress. Well,
sure,
it's not, you know, it's not too much at this point. I don't really talk about it too very much yet.
Sorry, we don't.
That's okay. No worries.
I don't want to promote it if it's not ready, but the point is, he's putting T-shirts out there with RBE type messages, new paradigm messages, and so what if we joined up with revolutionary or impact artists and put their designs on T-shirts as well as maybe some other functional art products. And so I don't know if I get a sense, since I'm talking to two artists here on this podcast, Zach and Amanda, that are also in the RBE space,
If I could just jump right in there on that. First of all, I want to back up a little bit and speak to your first statements regarding how being able to help artists to meet their basic needs would free them up to supply the world with paradigm shifting expressions. And that speaks to another one of my little mottos in my little gallery is free your time, free your mind. Obviously, we would all be revolutionary artists to some degree if we weren't pinned down by the labor system that we have to adhere to in order to survive. But that's old tea. We already know that. But yeah, it's definitely exciting to be having these conversations, and one would hope that through these conversations, an emergence of radical artists, if you will, would appear. And I think that the reason why we don't have more than that right now, not to just always scapegoat the monetary system, but it is a cold hard fact that if you're not a Thomas Kincaid type artist, it's very hard to garner a following. And if you don't want to be a starving artist, you really have to go along with pop culture and trends and whatnot. So yes, creating a space for collaboration and radical revolutionary art, whatever you want to call it, is absolutely necessary right now more than ever. And I'm just so excited to have met someone else who thinks that and knows that. And I'd like to know what Robert thinks about all that as well. I see him smiling big.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Amanda. Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I'm not that dedicated to art as Troy is. I've been watching his growth process for the last half year or a year or so. And that's really amazing to see that, he's also trying to adapt, but also live his passion, right? Because that's very important. That gives you energy, it motivates you. And that's why you guys are probably doing what you're doing. And Troy is also. And if you zoom in, I mean, art is very important. If you zoom out a bit, we always talk about, to make things visible in society, we talk about 12 sectors. And we use, Troy mentioned the 3 pillars, and we use the 12 sectors of society a lot from Barbara Marx Hubbard. So if you zoom out, you can see there is music and there is science, right? Indigenous wisdom and learning and education. And you could basically see all these sectors which are connected, but at the moment in our current systems, they are still in silos. So they're all equally important. So I think maybe that's something that we sort of forget in the process. We focus on one sector and we're saying, this is, our message, which is great because everybody was doing that great stuff in each sector is important. But I can see that these feedback loops, these connections weaved in a new model, a new system, that would be really fantastic.
Yeah, y'all said there's two artists here, but I'm definitely in the starving artist camp as well. I've been on unemployment for a while as well, but I mean, I just realized for the last 5 years I haven't had essentially a home or a consistent job, and I haven't courted work at all. I don't seek work. I just travel around and mostly live completely dependent on other people, interdependent, and I love that. I think it's beautiful. I think it's how we all should live. It's been so long I don't really think about it anymore, but I live to make art. I live to gain insight into the human condition and the story of life, and to see this whole life as a work of art, as a story that is unfolding. And it's a very rich story when you think about it like that, when you shift your lens to think about art isn't just something you do to pass the time or to beautify a space or distract yourself or entertain yourself. I mean, that's kind of grotesque and vulgar to me, to think about art as entertainment, as this pure distraction from life. That art, I think, is like the ultimate point of existence. I mean, I think it's why we're here, to basically make physical these philosophical questions and quandaries, and to qualify reality instead of quantifying it endlessly into a money sequence and making it into something that can be profited off of. Art is the reason we live. Art is the reason that we fucking exist. I think everybody is an artist, really, or could be. And it's very sad that we live in a world where people don't think that they could be, that everything could be an art. I was posting this on the Moneyless Society page somebody was talking about automation and, oh, we'll still need people to make clothing and things like that. And first of all, we don't. But when we're freed from labor and we're able to do whatever we want, everyone will become an artisan, I believe, because we will all want to do something. You know, I have a friend who likes to crochet and to knit, and she was actually talking about, she was kind of scared of the automation thing because it was like, it would put her trade, it would devalue her trade because only a human could do things like that. And I think about, these women in Guatemala that were weaving these beautiful garments by hand, and the human spirit can't help but create things. And that's really why we're here. And I think to view our struggle as an artistic creation, not just like artists, imbuing a revolutionary message into their work that makes it more palatable, that helps people understand things better. But it's like, it's changing our view to see this whole act of creating a new world as a collective human work of art, which is an interesting, thing. I'm just kind of thinking about that myself, that we are building the world. We're creating the world like a great novel, like a great movie. That's my thing. I'm a filmmaker. I make movies, and I've been making a movie out of this world, out of this life. And gradually, as I see more need, as my camera zooms in on the horrors of the world, the homelessness, the climate collapse, the disaffection of a majority that is suckered into a dreamlike, haze of consumption and thoughtless life, of, a material culture that doesn't value any objects that it creates. And it's a crazy story that we're living in crazy times that are totally need to be talked about. That it's like you turn on the TV and people are, there's like workplace comedies. And it's like, we're living in a crazy time where billionaires are flying into space and the world is coming to an end. And, it's like wars, riots in the streets, everything is crazy. And it's like, we can't even really appreciate what a story it is because we don't have the perspective that art gives us. We can't zoom out. We're so zoomed in, we only see one little piece at a time. We can't see that it's a mosaic. Even in its dark moments, it's beautiful and intentional and meaningful, that it is an ecosystem that's creating and learning itself. All of us are a part of creating that. And that's the revolution that needs to happen. We need to make everybody an artist for the revolution. But yeah, we do need to get artists to make revolutionary art. I'm sick of artists and filmmakers especially. They're very shallow people making these works of art that are just vain and uninteresting, and they're not about anything real. It's like, stick your head out the window and see the need in the world,
we'll talk about
and speak to that with your art.
And NFTs. I'll get your opinion on that later. But
ridiculous.
Yeah.
Absurd. You already got my opinion on that.
Just to piggyback off of what you were saying there, Marlo, it really speaks to how everyone can be an artist, and essentially is, because, as you said, humans have an innate drive to create. And so I think that the term artist gets lost in, again, pop culture and capitalist trends such as oil paintings, pottery, movie making, things like that, when at its core, it's just ingenuity. So whatever you're out there creating, whether you're coming up with automated systems, if you're coming up with automated systems, you're an artist to a degree, because you are creating something, or you're using your inborn ingenuity to put something out into the world that's tangible, that is going to produce an effect and essentially a feedback loop in the environment that you live in. And that's essentially what art does. But to step back just a little further, I like what you said about interdependence. That is a beautiful thing. I'm sure that your life isn't a walk through the park sometimes because of your circumstances, but it's the kind of thing that needs to be. But I've slept in the park. Episode 2, Echo Park, right?
It's a nap in a park.
No, I've slept in many parks. I really have. I've slept in a lot of parks. It's not that bad. Keep going.
Oh, I was just going to say, it's a beautiful point to bring up, because if we're going to start with this revolutionary art venture, I think a great place to begin would be to start depicting what interdependence looks like, because I'm pretty sure I can say with confidence that we've all forgotten that. Society as a whole is so individualistic that interdependence is extremely foreign, and obviously it always gets bashed, like with points of morality or laziness or something like that, and we really do need to get back to that interdependence point that we've all forgotten.
Well, we should also, we got to work together. We really do. We're in the same revolution.
Absolutely.
And in the spirit of moving away from this, geocentric, human-centric Copernican model of the universe, we need to work together. We need to move together and all practice what we preach. That's one of my favorite parts of this show, is forming these relationships with people that really grow after the microphones are turned off, that we keep building the change, that we keep coming together and working together and really building this new human family, this new human collaborative venture. That's what it all comes down to, really, is collaboration. I mean, that's like I don't know. There's so many central points and pillars of this system and the rottenness that holds it together. But I really think that the ultimate generative, creative shift is to switch from competition. We need to shift from individualization and competition that results from that into a sense of collaboration and working together, being able to access our human potential that is completely walled off, not just by the paywalls of the monetary system, but by our own inability to reach out to other people, our pride that keeps us from, wanting to help, to work with others, that keeps us from opening up and sharing and, realizing that we don't got this. We don't got this. I don't got this. We got this. I don't got this. Whoever you are, you are better off working with other people. The more people you bring into your life, the better.
That's exactly what I'm excited about, this artist collective that we're creating with the Renaissance Engine. And that's why the term Renaissance is so great, because it's about rebirth and, basically creating a whole new paradigm. But the artist collective is all about collaboration, not competition. But that flies in the face of capitalism and our socioeconomic system that's all about competition. And as we all know, in this attention economy, it's so hard to collaborate and get attention and get the resources you need to get recognized to really flip the paradigm. For example, I've already talked about some of the different projects we've been on, World Summit, Hack Humanity. And we have another one we didn't even mention, and I'm not plugging all this stuff for our own sake. It's about making visible what's happening or not happening out there. Robert and I worked with some other RBE money-free folks to create futurenowradio.com. That's a podcast that features a lot of, new paradigm thinkers, some very renowned thinkers. We featured Charles Eisenstein on there, and that brings to mind your talking there, Zach, about interbeingness and interdependence. And
I love him.
Yeah, and that's what he's all about. Yeah, for sure. So here's my greater point. Robert's continued on when I've done a couple of interviews with Robert and some guests, but I had to get back to my business. Robert's continued on. He's amassed, if you go to futurenowradio.com, right, Robert? Yep. There's a whole bunch of great interviews in there that probably not very many people have listened to. I don't know how big your following is. I hope it's great, because you guys have a great program. But the greater point is I don't even think you guys knew about us and what we were doing.
Yeah.
And therefore you did your own thing. You created a podcast, which again, I'm not knocking that. It's fantastic, but we're sort of all recreating the wheel time and time again, because we're not even aware of what other groups and movements are doing. So that's the greater question.
And you can thank the algo gods for that too, especially if you're still isolated like a lot of us are because of the pandemic. You're not out there in your community running into people that are thinking the same way you are, doing the same things you're doing. You're just online, and it's very hard, as you said, to gain visibility as someone who is essentially a dissent, and as a group that are dissents.
We can't even get people in our Facebook group. A lot of the people in our Facebook group don't even know we have a show.
The epitome of frustration.
I mean, the algorithm is doing us zero favors. It's really not helping us at all, and it really all comes down to, word of mouth and like direct contact with people. Really like spreading these things like pamphlets on the streets.
So there's got to be some, and Robert's continued with these on so many other groups I can't even keep track of it. So he's seen firsthand, he's been exposed to all these different world-changing groups out there. They're doing amazing work, but we're not connected. We're not interdependent and interbeing and working together. And how the hell are we ever going to reach critical mass if we can't even organize ourselves in a great enough power to get discovered and all that. So that's my huge question of the day.
That is a great point.
Maybe to add, because you can see a lot of these clustering groups specifically are now focusing on this sort of orientating, this coordinating platform that seems to be missing to make all these energies visible. So that's really a good development going on. It's still, there's a lot of work to do, but there are already some very big groups, and they have very skilled professional people. They're working on this eco-synergy engine, or whatever you want to call it, and to see how we can make this all visible. So
that's good. That's hopeful. And my one little slice of that would be to create some artist collectives where we can do that with revolutionary, radical impact artists, whatever you want to call them.
Just really briefly, on that note, I want to throw some homework out there, as I do from time to time. I don't think I have in a couple of weeks. And of course, I do this to encourage people to get outside of their box and think a little differently and see what happens, see how they feel and what realizations they have. And I would love to see art from our listeners. If you just want to, here's my advice, just to make it clear and dry. Don't mow your yard this Saturday. Make something. I don't care if you don't mow your yard, maybe don't scoop the
Lawns
pool.
are terrible. Lawns are a massacre of biodiversity. Horrible.
I mean, just skip something on your must-do list, because I promise, unless it's like getting a kidney transplant or something, you'll be fine. And nobody's going to judge you for more than a day or two about it. And if they do, oh well. And just take a little time to make something. I don't care if you haven't picked up a pencil since, third grade, or if you'd rather write something, or if you'd rather, take a photograph of something. But it would be so awesome to see people stepping outside of the box, if for 30 minutes, if for an hour, and seeing what they're drawn to and what they manifest out of that time that they devoted to just being in the present moment and trying to create something that isn't valued by the monetary system, something that just gave you fulfillment for a few minutes, whether it was noting a riot going on in your town, or if it was noticing how blue the sky is, or noting how neighbors are getting along or not, whatever. Just create, make something, and show it to us.
I feel like in this incredibly confusing, chaotic, crazy world of plagues, pandemics, pestilence, war, this apocalyptic paradigm that we live in, it's so hard to make sense of things if we have no inner metric of making meaning. I read this Viktor Frankl quote earlier. He basically said that life is only unbearable if we don't have a sense of meaning and purpose in it. And I think that has insulated me from all of this. I've seen so many people lose their minds through COVID, especially because, and just the horror of the world since 2016, really, it was just like this landfill fire of bad news that keeps coming and coming and coming, and people don't see it as a continuum. They don't see it as a predictable outcome of a system. So you'll go mad if you don't have a way to make sense of it. And I think finding a medium that you can make the disparate and crazy and hurtful information in your life, in your own personal life, your own hard feelings you can't deal with, and the externalities in the world around you that are unfathomable and unbearable, find an artwork and be able to, and it's liberating. It's the ultimate liberation to be able to take something bad and make it into something beautiful and meaningful.
Hashtag transmutation.
That's what we need to do on a mass level, is to take all the bullshit, all the trash and monstrosity and the irreconcilable suffering in this world that is caused so thoughtlessly, and make it intentional, make it into a work of art. Like Bob Ross would say, that's just a happy little accident, take that brushstroke and make it into a little tree, or, take that wrong note and make it into jazz. Take the splatter of paint and make it into an expressionistic masterpiece. Because, the alternative is it's just meaningless. It's meaningless and confusing and chaotic and crazy. But, there's a lot of beautiful dissonant art out there. There's a lot of art that is like Guernica. It's a depiction of a horrible thing, but it illuminates it. It makes it greater than it was. And it's like better than just taking it and forgetting about it or distracting yourself, we can take all of this bad shit that's happening and make it intentional.
Yeah, and that's beautiful. And the other meaning in my mind about the term Renaissance, it's not just rebirth, but it's a re-beautifying, to come back to the points we were talking about. I think in a new paradigm, arts and beauty and even truth are going to flourish. I mean, it's just going to be amazing what we're going to unleash. So it truly is a renaissance. And if it's okay with you guys, I guess Amanda pointed out to me that I'm a member of the Moneyless Society Facebook group. So why can't I just post on there as a member, put a poll on there, and I want to see how many artists are in this group, and I want to know how many of them consider themselves impact artists or radical artists or new paradigm artists or revolutionary artists, and let's see what we can co-create as a collective.
I'd like to ask Robert one last question. Robert, what is a sort of a revolution in art or a beautification of this world? What does that Renaissance mean to you? Kind of maybe as a closing diatribe.
Well, I think it's very inspirational, right? That's what we're looking for, to inspire people. And like I mentioned, I think art is a very important part of it. I would love to say, as if we're talking about the Renaissance, I love zooming in and out, and maybe it's not only, it's a request maybe for people to challenge their attachments, just challenge your abilities, and open up for seeing that you can do great things for yourself, for this world. And from that perspective, I really am fulfilled with a lot of joy, inner joy. And of course, I can also understand that people need some inspiration and hope, and they want to see solutions and embrace them. So I'm not sure if I answered your question.
Robert, can you add one more closing sentiment about your Plato's cave?
Basically, you can see as an observer that we're still in Plato's cave. He was a philosopher. The story is about people sitting in a dark cave, and there's a fire behind them, and they are chained to their chairs, and their faces are also fixated. They only can watch the shadows. So all their life they've seen these moving shadows, and they think this is the real world. They think the shadows are actually happening. And Plato tried to explain, wait a minute, there's something behind the fire that is causing these shadows. If you walk out the cave, there's a beautiful world out there. But people don't understand this concept. It's too big to even comprehend, because all they know are the shadows, these living figures on the wall, which they think is real life. And I still feel that a lot of people need guidance. We want to guide them out of this cave, right? There's more than these shadows. And those are a lot of attachments that we have. And there's no one to blame for this. It's something that we grew up with, how we see the world, how we came to understand it.
So the monetary system is that shadow on the cave wall that's the next Copernican revolution that we need to have to see that the whole fucking monetary system doesn't have to be that way.
I would dare say that the cave is the monetary environment, and the shadows on the wall are the people who are orchestrating the mechanisms of it. I tend to think, as a lot of us do, politics is theater, and when they take these month-long vacations, they're just taking a hiatus.
Yeah,
and
but even Charles Eisenstein talks
plot,
about how even those people, the elites,
but yeah, the shadows on the wall, that's immediately where my mind went, where the supposedly bipartisan, they are products of the system too.
They're not in control of their own actions. They're not in control of their own desire. That's really the ultimate shadow show. That's the ultimate darkness that we all live in, that Carl Jung talked about it as the shadow. It's a very primal aspect or structural form of our unconscious, that we are trapped in our shadow, which is a projection cast by the ego, which comes between us and the true light. And we live in the shadow, and We are angry and insecure whenever we see glimpses of light on the other side of it. And we project all of our insecurities into this dark pooling shadow, and we become insane because of it, because the world that we see around us that is beautiful, that is benevolent, that is, the sun rises every day, like, damn it. I had this whole Shakespeare monologue memorized about the this ball of fire in the sky. I'm not even going to try it. Maybe I'll dub it. But that we live in a beautiful world. And if you think that the world is a scary, monstrous place, and it can be, and we see expressions of that every day, that's what you're going to see, because you're being puppeted. You're being puppeted by your own mind. And I think art is the greatest show. It's the greatest shadow show. It's the lie that tells the truth. It's the illusion breaker. We use illusions and we use dreams to end dreams. And that is the place that we all find ourselves, that we need to come together and tell a new story to get us through this long night. And I think the sun will rise on the other side of it.
A lot of great stuff, Zach. And I kind of want to add, too, for anybody that might, happen to be joining us, that doesn't really know too much about, like the Venus Project or Moneyless Society or a lot of things that we talk about here. I think something that Robert said is really relevant, and that's just be able to let go of your attachments, and what what you think about society and about the economy and about the way the world works. Just be able to step back from those assumptions and from those beliefs and ideas for a little while, and if you're interested in exploring some of these topics and these ideas, because there's a lot of stuff here, there is a lot of information, there's a lot to grasp, especially when it comes to all the different aspects of how these types of systems and societies would work, and the possibilities and things like that, as well as the scientific evidence that supports a lot of this stuff, as well as some of the, just kind of the more sociological and psychological aspects and things like that. And there's a lot of different workings, a lot of different theories, a lot of different people and projects going on here. And so don't discount this stuff. Be able to step back from your attachments and just explore this with an open mind. And I think that's one of the most valuable insights and tools, that a lot of the people can have, especially that are coming to this, that are new to this idea, essentially, that haven't explored this idea a lot.
Just really briefly, I know we've been trying to wrap up for like 10 minutes now, but I have to share a quick testimony, piggybacking off of what you're saying there, because I know for me, like it would be for anyone, it's extremely hard to detach from your identity. That's where our attachments are centered. That's where the core of our attachment is. So when trying to adopt new ways of thinking, like the Venus Project puts out, for instance, the easiest way to do that is to realize that your identity, quote unquote identity, is a result of conditioning from your environment, and the things that you associate yourself with and claim to be are no more than constructs that you have been taught by your culture to adapt to and practice. They are not your identity. They're not who you are, and it will be okay if you try on a new one. It'll be okay. You can try new things. You can learn new things, and if nothing else, if you want to even look at it this way, it might even reinforce how you believe or feel about yourself, even if you don't decide to adapt to a new way of thinking. So just realize and remember that if you want to try and wrap your head around other things, that it's okay to do that, and that it's totally possible. You just have to remember that your identity is rooted in your environment, and you're limited by that unless you decide to step out of the box.
I dig it. All right. Well, you want to wrap it up with anything? How do we find you guys online?
You can find it on hackhumanity.net. And we have the futurenow.com. So
futurenowradio.com. No, I mean, my book's on Kindle, I guess, self-published on Amazon. So the next Copernican Revolution.
Well, thanks again for both of you guys for coming on. We really appreciate the time. It was a great conversation. We'd love to have you guys on again in the future. And like Zach was saying too, collaborate, work with you guys in whatever capacity we can. Let's make it happen, right?
Yeah. So
Great.
Grateful for you guys. Good work you're doing with the podcast and the Moneyless Society.
Paradoxically, when we begin to embrace the immensity of the global changes that all of us on the planet face, not just us as individuals, but as a species, and we seek something extraordinary, like the transformation of the whole world, then our own stuff starts to seem trivial. our own issues begin to fall away in importance. This does not discount any real or serious issues one may have, but when we seek the evolution of all of humanity, we evolve our own consciousness. Our own individual egos lose power over us, and we discover our authentic selves, our true and good human nature, and begin acting powerfully in service to the whole of humanity. With this personal shift, we begin to move beyond our own sense of victimhood and powerlessness and cynicism, despite being in a shitstorm of global problems that are seemingly too overwhelming for us to ever have any hope of solving. We become empowered individually and collectively to radically shift our paradigm of what's possible. We come to find that the solutions to solving our global problem can be the same solutions that can help us solve our individual problems. Troy Wiley, Copernican Revolution. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Moneyless Society podcast. Just a friendly reminder that we are a listener-supported project. You can show your support by visiting our Patreon at www.patreon.com/Moneyless Society. Aside from financial support, we need people. Moneyless Society is growing and more rapidly than ever. If you think you have the skill sets, or just the passion and the time to devote to building new systems that will save our world from its current destructive trajectory, then reach out to us at contact@moneylesssociety.com. We'll be glad you're here, because without everyone, we can't get there. Be well.